Officially, welcome back to the Hearts of Man podcast. So today we're talking about an uncomfortable, misunderstood, and honestly, I would say long overdue, but we're addressing it in a different way today. And that topic is the toxic masculinity trap that no one warns us about. All right. So now, before we get into this and it gets sticky, listen, this is not about attacking men. It's not about defending men. This is more about exposing the unhealthy pressures, emotional conditions, and social expectations that many boys and men are forced to carry, often in silence. Because the truth is, a lot of men are not just living in masculinity, they trapped in a version of it that we never chose. Um, and that trap can cost men a lot. Sometimes it costs their peace, relationships, emotional health, um, some cases their lives. And today we're gonna start breaking it down, and we're gonna get right into it. So let's let's go ahead and drag along. So with all that said, I want to kind of get into these definitions that I have. Um, the first one, let's just look at define masculinity, right? It is a set of traits, behaviors, or social expectations traditionally associated with being a male. Things like strength, leadership, confidence, courage, responsibility, and protections are often associated with masculinity. Now, when the term toxic masculinity is brought up, the conversation is usually brought up to say that it refers to cultural beliefs about what a real man, quote unquote, what a real man is supposed to be. It is the idea that men must never cry, never appear weak, dominate others, suppress emotions, solve everything alone, and prove their worth through toughness, control, or aggression. Or I would even say overworking. I would add that in there. Um, Now, this I got a question about this after I quote this next definition. But while I was looking this up, I saw one that said healthy masculinity. So healthy masculinity, they say, is strength with self-awareness. It looks like emotional honesty, accountability, discipline, protection without control, confidence without arrogance, and vulnerability without shame. So before I ask about the last one, the first two, do y'all have any? If I need to read over them again, do y'all have any add-ons, take away from anything that I said about masculinity or toxic masculinity? And I'm looking at Coach Face. That means yes, but he's trying to save it for the show.
Um, I don't necessarily have an issue with the definition. I think that I think the definitions are a good starting point for the conversation. Um, I don't know about the first one though. That's the one I'm definitely a little bit hesitant about. I don't know what it is, but it's something in there that just is not it's not sitting well with me, and I don't know what it is. And it may come down to what we're talking about, like right here, the definition is who's defining what this masculinity is.
Mm,
Even the next definition, when it talks about the cultural beliefs, we talk about cultural beliefs. Which cultures are we talking about? And are these cultural traits different in different communities? Or is it a generality that we use every time we have this conversation? Is the way
right.
masculinity or toxic masculinity looks in India versus in Mississippi, in New York, in LA, in China, so when we're looking at the cultural beliefs, like I said, I want to dig a little bit more. I know we're going to get into it, but when we're talking about the cultures and the cultural beliefs, are we speaking in generalities, or when we speak about cultural, which cultures are we talking about?
Yeah, I'm just gonna pull my car over to the side of the road and put my hazard on and wait.
See,
I told you I saw them blinkers going, bro. I
yeah.
saw it.
I was where Coach was at. I had my blinkers on, had my hazards on, but then I cut them back off and I kept going. So
Absolutely. Hey,
yeah.
so let me ask this question. With that third one, I almost didn't put it in, right? Do we need to define healthy masculinity if we correctly define masculinity? Do we have to say healthy masculinity?
So I personally, right off the rip, I'm going to say no. I think that at the end of the day, we should just be able to use masculinity. However, comma, I think when we are talking about, actually, hold on. I was going to say, here's my initial add on to that thought. Maybe it's okay to use healthy and toxic only to separate the two when we're having conversation. However, comma, if we thinking of polarities, if there's an healthy, then there has to be an unhealthy with the toxic part. And then if we're just speaking in terms of masculinity and we're speaking about polarities, what would be the opposite of masculinity? Right. So then now I'm thinking about we don't necessarily need to separate the two. We need to either use masculinity or whatever is the opposite of masculinity. So that's where my pen has been put at. I'm on the side of the road now.
See, that's kind of like my whole thing. Like these adjectives that we put before a word, to like define what type of it is. Um, and I'm wondering, and not that anybody need to research it or anything of that nature, but when we do a comparison, the same source that gave us the definition for toxic masculinity, does it also give us the same source for toxic femininity? Is there, healthy masculinity? Is there healthy femininity? But again, why the adjectives when at the end of the day, if we're talking about what the core competency of the thing is, it does not necessarily have to be described as healthy. It is what it is. At the end of the day, if it is not that, then it's just not that. So if it's not masculinity, it's just not masculinity. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of like my whole point. That's why I say I'm on the side of the road with the hazard lights on right now, because I think as we continue in this conversation, it's going to become more impact.
Yeah. I'm excited.
Whew. I see a hoorah out there. Wait a minute. My bad. Nothing. Listen, we love all our brothers in arms and sisters in arms, but we army strong all day. You know what I mean? One day somebody told me I could be all I could be, Anyway, I'm joking. What's your name? Phil again? B? Welcome to the show, brother. We're good to have you. Good to have you. Let's get into the mix of it. So the first topic I want to talk about is suffering in silence. So men are often conditioned to avoid openness and help seeking, right? One CDC backdata brief found that among men who reported daily anxiety or depression, less than half, of about 41%, took medication or spoke to a mental health professional. Before we get to the question, do y'all see a problem with those numbers? And now, granted, these are what's reported, right? Like Coach always reminds us of that when we're dealing with statistics and research. It's about who's actually pulled and who actually is reported. But based off of who's actually reporting signs or symptoms, only 41% is either on medication or seeking help.
Yeah,
I
to that
mean,
point. No, that's right there.
No, I was just gonna say, if that's the research that you pulled, and that's what you got, then I mean, I'm okay with using it as the base for this conversation, unless Coach has something else.
No, I mean that's kind of what I was going to say. Like a lot of times, going back to what Gaddy was saying, we got to look at the we got to look at the sample in which this was taken from, and for statistics to be like true statistics, it must take a sample from every representative. And if it doesn't take a sample from every representative, then is it really a true sample? And does it actually include your cultural norm, your cultural group, if you will? So, but in in the space of not knowing, having something is better than nothing.
I love it. I love it. Um, that's my intent when I'm pulling these studies is to give us a baseline. And so for because I don't agree with everything. It's some things you have to look at the story behind the research instead of just the raw numbers. Because all raw data across the board has a narrative attached to it. So you have to dig a little deeper, and that's what we intend to do. Kind of get into the mix of it in this conversation. So, a question I got for you, brothers, for this question, first one is: what are some expectations in marriages, all right, that cause men to suffer in silence?
What are some expectations in marriages that cause men to suffer in silence? One, I think, is the pressure to do things right now. I think sometimes there is pressure for men to get the house now, to get the big car now, to be at $100,000 earning now. And I think what happens sometimes is, as a man, or as men sometimes, they're looking to please and to want to take care of their family in the best way possible, right? And sometimes there's pressure for the woman to say, hey, we need to get a house now. Well, maybe y'all are 22 years old, maybe he's working third shift right now. Maybe the finances just don't work. Maybe, y'all want to have some more kids, maybe the thought the long term thought hadn't been thought out on, maybe on the woman's side or on the wife's side for this situation. And the husband feels like, hey, I have to do these things. And he don't say nothing. And then he goes and get the house, and he gets her the nice car, and he has a nice car too, because she has pressure, maybe from her girlfriends or her inner circle or social media, or the need to want to be whatever, or to look a certain way to the PTA, and all the kids got to have nice clothes, and they have to go to private school, and dudes don't say nothing because they try. And next thing you know, they end up in debt. There's arguments, there's a lot of stuff going on. And then sometimes, to this question, they don't say nothing after a while. Sometimes they just, let things roll. And sometimes they think they can handle it, because of the pressure that comes. So I think one of the expectations in marriages that cause men to suffer in silence is the pressure that they get, the expectation that they have to do things a lot sooner than when they're logically better for the family.
I like that. I love that response because I 100% agree. I will start off by saying maintaining the structural integrity of their relationship. And what do I mean when I say that? There's a lot of comparison that takes place in the space of relationship, looking at what some other family is doing, what some other husband is doing, where they are, their ability to just leave work and show up and eat lunch with the kid, during, during school hours, things of that nature. But then in contrast and in conjunction with that, there is also the pressures that where most of us don't necessarily see it as pressure, which just surround the emotions. And we kind of talked about this on Monday night. So you were trained and raised to express yourself and tell the world how you feel, but then by that same token, for me, I really wasn't. So now, that being said, not saying it's 100% your fault, but there is an expectation for your emotions to matter. But then by that same token, you may not have ever seen a man express himself. You may not have ever seen a man sitting with thought trying to figure out what exactly the next move is, and then in your belief, you think something is wrong. And it may not necessarily be anything wrong. It may just be him processing information. And then when you ask a question, he is like, well, nothing. And so in your mind, you think me saying nothing is deflection when it's really not deflection. It's more of processing and trying to understand and come up with a solution. Um, so there are a lot of unseen, unnecessary pressures within the scope of that when it comes down to just simply being the man. Because at the end of the day, I'm supposed to move heaven and earth whenever you identify something as being a problem. So that's kind of like where I'm gonna start at right there, and then I'm gonna kind of unplug for a second and pull off on the side of the road again.
Man, I love both of those answers. Man, Unc, your answer really resonated personally, right? Because we all men up here and we've all been through some things. In I think in the space of a lot of these questions, or seen others that have gone through it, and so that is such a real statement to the idea of getting everything now. Like I don't know who told our women, and I'm being careful because I got daughters. I don't want my daughters thinking they're supposed to leave my house and walk into the arms of somebody that got a mansion that sits on 100 acres, and he goes everywhere by helicopter and private jet. Like, come on, right? That person might exist, but the chances of us running into him, you know, are slim. But and that's not even that, but the idea of putting that pressure on somebody to even reach those goals, you know. Uh, and I think for me, I think there's a whole list of expectations, and that provision is definitely one of them. But also, I think it's this idea that men are strong enough to deal with anything, right? And not saying men are weak, but I think the idea is sometimes society goes, we can do say whatever to men, or we can ignore men, or we can act like they're not in that space and they're going to be all right because they're strong enough to deal with it. All right. Nobody wants to be in a space and be ignored and be disregarded. And so I see a lot of times it's not that there's necessarily any act of mistreatment, right? Not they're not she's not beating you or nothing like that, but to be completely disregarded, he'll be all right. He's a man. I ain't worried about that. He a man. Oh, he'll take his. He'll be all right. He'll replace it. He'll do this. Or a real man would. When I hear that statement, that means when you say a real man would, it means you're about to do some foolishness, and you think me being a man is supposed means that I'm just strong enough to just put up with it and deal with it. No, not going to jump ahead of myself. uh, any alibis before we move? Hey, uh, yes.
Oh, I
Yeah,
am.
yeah.
Nah, I ain't gonna do that one. I'm gonna leave that one alone.
It can get sticky. But I tell you, it can get sticky.
I'll put it like this. I'll put it out there, and if y'all want to go there, if Coach think it's okay and appropriate, men are expected in marriage to go through droughts, long droughts, months. So I don't know if y'all want to talk about it or not. So I just throw it out there.
I mean, listen.
Wait a minute. What type of drops you talking about, sir?
You know what drought he talk about?
There's a
Said his life.
to withhold or abstain from I only use bad words when I talk about this.
What I'm hearing you say is that I don't have no sexual excuses.
There you go.
All right. Just wanted to make sure that I was understanding you clearly.
Yes, sir.
All right.
So I think, go ahead.
Nah, I was just gonna say, like, and I haven't met a man that disagrees with me, especially we're talking about marriage, right? But there was a preacher I heard a long time ago. I can't remember his name right now, and he said, Baptist preacher. He said, "There's a reason why I wasn't Catholic." He said, "It wasn't about all the other stuff. It wasn't about everything else that we could talk about." He said, "But the problem is, they believe in nuns. I believe in some." He said, "You're not gonna put me in a space to where I can't have my woman, and you tell me the only thing I get is none. I need some." Hey, he was flipping the words and spinning on it, but what he was saying, I was nodding my head like, right.
I Coach No in the line of coaching, and especially when coaching men and talking to men and being around men and just knowing people in marriages and stuff like that, and even hear women. I've heard women talk about it, in conversation, and think that and these are now when I'm talking about marriages, I'm not talking about the regular marriage. I'm talking about a marriage that I'm talking about the biblical marriage, the people that got married under God, the people got married and said, who the body belongs to, all of that stuff like that, without, not withholding from each other, all of that stuff like that, there's stuff in there too, so I think I'm talking about those people who supposed to know better and to still do that and withhold and say that you're expected to just wait, and you're expected to just suffer in silence until I feel like that I'm ready. You know what I'm saying? And I know men who in this situation and have talked about the length of time that it is in between. Now, not going to go into details about why, but there are a bunch of different reasons why, and none of them are because of somebody was being unfaithful. So I get that sometimes, but I think that there's an expectation for men to just say, okay, I'll wait as long as it takes for you to come to a place or a point in your life to where you're ready to do something, So I think that that's an issue as well.
Yeah, and let me say this. No one is saying that there are not scenarios or variables sometimes when this happens, right? Because I 100% agree that there are always two sides of the conversation, which is why I would love for the hearts of women one day to tackle some of these things we talk about from the male perspective. But I would say this. We're talking about the expectations, and then I'm gonna slide on to the next question. But we're talking about expectations. I think.
I want to. I think I need to address that question that's in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, bring it up.
Yeah. So drought, because of that time or after childbirth or manipulating. I'm not talking about someone who physically can't. There's a disease, there's an issue, the different things that you named up here, childbirth, stuff like that. I am maybe talking more about the manipulation or just even the thought of just, I just don't want to do it anymore. I just don't want to, whatever like that, but not for anything that is out of their control.
Right. And I think,
What you got, Coach?
he always ready. But I think when we talk about this one, for me, I think there is an expectation when it comes to sex conversation, period, right? Because now we are always talking in the biblical sense, right? So we are always talking about husband and wife, right? Not just random people that we met and we say, oh, I want to be intimate with you now, but husband and wife. But I think the expectation is only one party gets to determine whether or not we should be having we should have sex in a marriage, right? And the reason why I say it that way, right? Because I know this is where the conversation gets sticky sometimes. The reason why I say it that way, because if the woman is not ready, or in that or in the mood or in the mind, or she don't want to, we respect that, and we will respect that. But there are often times that if the man don't want, we start questioning now his manhood. What do you mean you don't want to touch your woman? You got all this women in front of you, and you saying no? I just got off a 16 hour or pulled a double, or whatever the case may be, and I just might want to take a nap right now. But that's where those unrealistic ideas of how a man should respond comes into play. And so that's why I'm at with this conversation, because I understand, okay, yes, we're going to respect, with the wishes over here, but sometimes that respect turned into, no longer getting anything. So from the male perspective, but when we're tired for it, or when if the man don't want, there's always a narrative spun on it. So that's why this conversation, I think, gets serious for me.
So yeah, this conversation, this level of conversation can get slippery real quick. And Gaddy, I heard you say that there are two sides to the conversation. And I agree. There's always two sides to the conversation. But let's not mistake it. There's only one conversation. So if my side or your side is the focus in the conversation, then we're not focused on the conversation. We're only focused on my side of the conversation. So let's keep the main thing the main thing. And what is that? If there is going to be a standard that is rooted around how I feel, I'm just saying that for the sake of conversation. If there's going to be standard that's rooted around, if there's going to be a standard that's rooted around how I feel, then that standard should be an equal standard for both. Because at the end of the day, what these gentlemen are talking about, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. What these gentlemen is talking about is that I don't get the latitude to not feel like, because it is automatically ingrained in the mind of my partner that if he is ready, I need to be ready. And if we're not necessarily careful, we can create a double standard in that regard alone, right? Now, I think somebody asked the question, we're not necessarily talking about physical capability. I think I've seen, having a child, or, that monthly occurrence or whatever the case may be. No, not talking about that. That's understood, should be understood. And if that's not an understanding that is already had, then there's deeper conversations that need to be had, just being honest. But if we're talking about gaining and maintaining and sustaining healthy connection, healthy relationships, then at the end of the day, when we have said conversations, we need to look at the double standards that are created. And I'm not just simply talking about in that regard, it's like across the entire table. If this standard exists, then it needs to be a standard that we have that's available to both parties in the relationship.
Absolutely. And I be saying Coach be in my notebook, but he just be making it sound better than what I can say. But yeah, I 100% agree right there. So let me ask this question before I bring up question 2. Do you believe, or let's just bring it up. Do you believe that there are expectations in this in the arena of professional or social environments that have different expectations, or do you think it's kind of similar across the board to what we've already been talking about? Because I know we talked specifically about marriage, but are there different reasons when it comes to the professional world and the social world of why men suffer in silence?
Um, I can say yes and no, right? The reason why I say yes is because it's a different type of relationship. It's a different type of relationship in the work environment than there is in the home environment. In the work environment, of course, I'm expected to perform the inner and outer workings of my job description. Once I get really good at doing so, then ideally I'm supposed to do so with the love of the people that I serve when it comes down to that job, so forth and so on. Are there expectations where we suffer in silence? Yeah, because at some point in time you recognize that your value is wrapped around your performance. Let's call a spade a spade. If you lose that job today, you'll be replaced tomorrow or within the next week or so. It's that simple. Now, change the dynamics and go home. We're expected to, our value is wrapped around our performance. That has been a cultural and societal norm for as long as I can remember. And it's always been hidden under the guise of provide and protect. That's really what it has been. Now, we've been talking about that for years. Provide and protect. Generally, when people talk about men, that's the first two things that come out of their mouth. But at the end of the day, is that the limitations of who I am in this house, in this relationship, right? Because if that's the limitations of it, do not be surprised when that becomes the only thing that I do. And I get really good, just like at work, I get really good at doing that. And sure, I might be doing it for the sake of the people that I serve in the household. But at the end of the day, if you're going to reject everything about me that goes outside of the whole provision and protection thing, then there are some people say, you know what? I'm tired. I'm tired of fighting. I'm tired of arguing. I'm tired of doing this. I'm tired of doing that. So that's why I say there are similarities, right? But then there are also differences as well. Because at the end of the day, there is no firing me at home unless we just decide to, hey, this ain't working. We need to go our separate ways. Let's just call a lawyer, right? That has a more detrimental outcome, especially when there are children involved. At work, I give you a 2 week notice, and by the time I give you my 2 week notice, I already got another job. And I probably got it lined up to where I'm going to start the next day after my 2 week notice is over. Or maybe I take a break in between. It's pretty much up to me. Now, there's also a notion of the expectation. I've seen this at work as well. The expectation of the spouse as it pertains to me at my job. I promise you, there was a situation to where a young man was being reprimanded, and he came back to work the next day and said, "Hey, man, my wife told me if I lose this job, I better not come home." And I was like, "Wait, what?" And I mean, real talk, not making this up. And I promise you, he started flying a straight and narrow after that. So I think there is a double standard. I think there is a suffering silence because, again, like we talked about that double standard, does he have the latitude to tell her that as it pertains to her job?
That right there. Um, what was the question again? Bring the question up again. There you go. Are there different reasons why men suffer in silence in professional and social events? I think I'm a add on a branch to Coach's talking point when he was saying yes and no. So I think, are there different reasons why? I would say yes. I think at the end of the day, if you keep peeling both of these back, the root of it will probably be the same thing. You really get to the root of the reasons why men suffer in silence in the professional and social environments. I think the root of it is the same, but I think maybe to what coach was saying, it may look different, in the professional setting, let's go back to the military, I don't remember how much, well, I remember hearing it, and it prevented me from getting the mental health things that I should have gotten earlier in my career. And that was that if you go to mental health, this is what I heard. This was a rumor. I've never saw it in black and white in no field manual or none of that stuff. So this is what I've always heard from a young sergeant or a young private or whatever it was a long time ago. That if you go to mental health or something like that, then they're going to have a mark on your files, and you will not make E7 or anything like that. So I thought that that was the truth. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I don't know. But there was something to whereas I suffered in silence longer than what I should have because I thought that I was going to have a mark on my record that was going to prevent me from getting promoted. Now, let's go to the social events, hanging out with your boys, different things like that. If we all three hanging out, you know what I mean? Let's go back to the 19, the 20-year-old, the 21-year-old versions of us when we in the club, when we drinking, when we hunting and doing all of these different things like that. And then we got problems at home. We got problems with the kids. The freaking soldiers don't want to act right. First starting up by behind. All of this stuff going on. We suffering. But I can't go to y'all and talk to y'all about that, right? Because then now I'm a punk. I can't even go to sick call. Because if I go to sick call, I'm going to be looked at as a less than of a man. Man, just throw some water on it, take some ibuprofen and suck it up and drive on. So I think again, in those social environments, as we were all hanging out at the club or the bar and stuff like that, in many cases, sometimes when we were younger like that, we had to suffer because we didn't necessarily want to seem weak, to our boys or whatever like that when we were going through things. I think we may have had some people at certain points, but I think overall men in general, they don't have that. So those are my two different reasons why men suffer. But again, I think if I peel it back, the root of it was going to be the same thing.
I like that. Like if I combine what both of y'all said, it's just kind of like layers where I was sitting with. I think it's a similar root. The idea that men are just expected to perform always, right? You're not allowed to like kind of like what you're talking about. It's not said out loud, but it's understood. Sometimes that you're not allowed to have a mental break. You're not allowed to have a mental breakdown. You just got to suck it up and drive on. And that's not. We look at that as a military saying because we've heard that a lot in the military. But for men, we've heard a lot of us heard that our whole life. Hey, you're a boy, suck it up. And I hear my sisters all the time when they dealing with my nephews when they were younger, used to say it all the time, you're a boy, quit crying. How about just quit crying? Because there's nothing to cry about. Why are we adding on you're a boy? That means the rest of his life he has to remember he's a boy, so he can't show emotion. And so because of that, a lot of things we shut up about. If a man responds to conflict, and shows emotion when he responds to conflict, oh, he's a weak man. So to me, it is the same baseline, like you said, that leads into into the differences that exist in both marriage, and professional and in social. Because we can't be out here arguing and fighting in the streets, because then people gonna say, people gonna say, hey, we're weak, we're emotional, we're not emotionally intelligent, and things like that. Man, this conversation can definitely get away from us, because this is a tough one. This next topic, we're gonna move forward. This one is a serious one. I don't hear it talked about a lot, but men unaliving at a much higher rate. So, and this is according to a CDC study of 2023, right? That males make up nearly 80% of self-inflicted unaliving. And the self-inflicted rate among males were about, it says, 4 times higher than females. With this settled in, right? Question for this topic is, what are some, I apologize, my mind. How do you believe the idea of performance-based value, and Coach kind of went in there, but how do you believe that it affects the quality of life for men?
Can I oh, was you gonna go, Coach? Oh, can I share a quick story? All right, first. And it's about what you just read about the unalivings and stuff like that. So a couple of weeks ago, I'll try to make it quick as possible. A couple of weeks ago, we was out at was at Starbucks and get my wife some coffee and ran into one of my old coaches from CrossFit. And, he shared with me that one of the guys that I used to do CrossFit, this is exactly what happened to him. And the thing about it, he didn't know it, but he was my rabbit. So what I named my rabbit was the guy that I used to chase in CrossFit. He was better than me at certain events and stuff. So when we were close, but he was better than me at a lot of stuff, but he was about my size and stuff like that. So I used to chase him. So I used to call him he didn't know it, but he was my rabbit. But this the thing that just happened to him. He was an officer in the military as well, and I look at those stats and stuff like that, and I look at, how, close to home that is, like, right now. You know what I mean? Like, this was just a couple of weeks ago. I haven't been to CrossFit in a while, but like I said, that was my rabbit, and I knew this guy. We used to have conversations and all of this stuff, and at 5 o'clock in the morning in CrossFit. So I just say that, shout out to him, RIP or RIH or whatever you want to call it, and to him and his family, but just to saying that, this stuff is real. And, I know a lot of times people see commercials and they hear about this stuff and they look at these statistics and stuff like that. But, a lot of times, those people, because most people don't go in the military. So most people are not always connected to somebody in the military. So they look at these stats and, it don't necessarily hit home and they can just brush it off. But, there's a lot of dudes that's going through stuff in silence. And this is the ultimate result of not getting the help and the support and stuff like that for whatever reason. It's just, it's really real, and it's very important, that it's just very important. So, all right, to the question, sitting on this reality, how do you believe performance-based value affect the quality of life of men? I think, just kind of go back to the military. It's really easy to go back there because that's one of the things that we do is a lot of us was chasing that bag, chasing that promotion, because that next promotion came with another bag. It came with responsibility, came with clout, it came with respect, all of those different things, came with sometimes more flexibility. It came with a lot of perks sometimes as well. So a lot of times what we did, it affected the quality of life. You don't necessarily get the rest you need. I spoke earlier about not necessarily going and getting the mental health support that you need while you going through all of the stuff. Dudes that getting divorced left and right in the military and showing up for work the next day. Dudes coming home from work and their wife done left them and they had work the next day. You know what I mean? The wife and then off doing something with somebody else and he had work the next day. You know what I'm saying? So it's dudes out there really suffering in silence. And, they're out there chasing all of this stuff and trying to get promoted and, trying to make the next rank and stuff like that. And, they're not sleeping well, they're not eating well, they hanging out in the clubs, drinking, all of that stuff like that, and um just the overall quality of life, I do believe, can be severely affected when everything is about that performance based value. When you just chasing that promotion and stuff like that, your quality of life and your relationships and all of that stuff can be drastically affected. I said a lot. Let me stop.
um, Quality of life is a very interesting topic, because there are a number of different things that go into quality of life itself. It's kind of like the ecosystem of a person, and a lot of them are more subjective in nature. And so, for the most part, and I think I might be giving a response that I may end up giving again. But for the most part, that man has to have a clear concept of who he is aspiring to be. And if he doesn't have a clear concept of who he's aspiring to be, it's going to be very difficult for him to achieve that. And so, a lot of times, without a clear concept, he becomes ultimately somebody who performs. And so, in the performance state, you're looking for a particular outcome. But unfortunately, you are not the determiner of what that outcome is. The family becomes that determiner. So the wife, the kids, whatever that looks like. So, in essence, in a non-realized concept of your identity, you're performing, hoping that at the end of the day, you are helping people come to the realization that you are value. Well, ideally, you should be valued just because of who you are to the family. But that, for whatever reason, has lost its luster. So now, instead of the identity being the value, it's the performance that is the value. Therefore, I can't get sick. I can't get tired. I can't get frustrated. I can't get any of those things because at the end of the day, if I'm not performing, and you guys know we talked a couple of weeks back and we made a joke about put the trash out, right? And y'all know how I'm about put the trash out and cutting the grass and stuff like that. But those are performance measures. And so at the end of the day, if I am living a life based upon performance measures, then that means that somebody now evaluates those performance measures and then give me feedback based upon those performance measures. It's just like going to work. And at the end of the day, we live in a society to where, unfortunately, the man, because he does not have a clear concept of his identity, he does not even understand what those performance measures look like. And he sit around a lot of time looking for the response of the people that he is serving. That's the problem.
Right, right. I think I'm right there. I think whenever we feed into that need to please everybody around us at all times, um, it takes away from our ability to focus anywhere remotely to self. Now, I don't believe that there's any true quality of life that is attached to that. You can't live your life just like, well, I got to do this or Dwayne gonna be mad, but then I got to do this too so that Unc ain't mad. Oh yeah, let me do this because I don't want Nick D to feel this kind of way. Oh man, my friend over here, I got to do. And there's a lot of us who we'll say the term people pleasing, but when we push this concept that your value is based upon how you can perform, you're just setting that ground for people pleasing. That means my life is I'm only good. I'm only a good friend. I'm only valued. I'm only loved if I do. And I see way too often people posting things like, hey, the only thing that is truly loved is women, children, and dogs, right? Because a lot of men truly feel that unless like it's conditional based upon our performance, or you're not going to love us, right? And so, and I keep trying not to go too far, but and I'm always big on, hey, we can't. We don't do that with our daughters, right? So why do we do that with our boys? We know, right? Now let me be clear. Back when my grandmama was alive, my grandmother used to always say, tell the girls, hey, y'all come in here when I'm cooking, or the boys, y'all get out the kitchen when the women in the kitchen cooking. We used to have those type, but it's where we're at today. We don't do that, right? So we don't say, because you're a woman, you should do. You do. But we put that on the men. So you should do. Well, then if we're doing that one way, we're going back to what we were saying before. If we're doing that one way, but we're not doing it the other way, are we saying that women are supposed to just do whatever they want and men are supposed to do whatever everybody else want? You get how the scales are slanted now. It's not balanced, But this like I said, this conversation can can get away from us if we let it. Anything to add before I ask the next question? All right. So the next question I got is, how could ideas like using aggression and dominance to replace leadership and confidence affect the mental health and physical health of men?
So I'm
I knew you was gonna be the one to have
yeah,
fun on that one.
yeah. Um,
You better not steal my answer, 'cause I wrote it down.
I'm just saying, because the question kind of the question to me kind of leans in one direction and then kind of shakes it on the backside, right? How could ideas like using aggression and dominance to replace leadership and confidence affect men's mental health and physical health? So I would say initially aggression, and I think for whatever reason society paints a bad picture about aggression. I think aggression is necessary at times as long as it's directed in the right direction and not at the wrong people, right? But I can't exist in a space of aggression for a prolonged period of time. It's like driving a stick shift and going from first gear to second gear and then hitting 80 in second gear. I'm redlining. So now when I continue to stay in that prolonged heightened sense of aggression, I kind of talked about this the other day. We kind of talked about cortisol, right? Because at the end of the day, that's like fight or flight on a constant. And once I'm at fight or flight, now it diminishes my, immune system. And then that makes me more prone to sickness and disease, things of that nature. So when we get to that heightened sense of awareness and try to exist in that, thinking that is leadership, that is a false perception of reality. In fact, that's not leadership at all, because at the end of the day, that should be like the last resort to resolve issues. But there's another side to it, because if there are constant issues that exist and things of that nature, that's another problem that need to be addressed. So I look at this from two different perspectives, like being in that heightened sense of awareness, aggression and dominance, whatever the case may be, to control situations when needed. But then by that same token, why is that the case if it is the case? And trust me, I do understand that there are some men out there who do not have the necessary level of emotional intelligence to get to the point of understanding how to resolve conflict in a mild manner. But then by that same token, there are also situations to where conflict is the norm because the person that they're with are accustomed to drama in their life. And so when things are, calm and easy and whatever the case may be, they may create drama. So I think it's two sides to the coin when we look at this. But yeah, choosing aggression and dominance for a prolonged period of time is very unhealthy because that's going to promote disease.
Okay. I thought you was going to go there when you started talking about aggression is not necessarily a bad thing, but then you also talked about, both sides of the coin. So that's what I wrote down. So what I wrote, well, not what I wrote down add to, but not take away, right? So the question starts off with saying, we were talking about ideas. How could ideas like using aggression and dominance to replace leadership and confidence affect men's mental and physical health? So when I see ideas, I'm thinking about the ideas, and then I'm thinking about how the ideas affect my mental and my physical health, right? So that's where I'm gonna start with. Now, to add to that, what I mean by add to but don't take away, I think we need to not replace, but I think we need to add and keep all four: aggression, dominance, leadership, and confidence. But to Coach's point, or maybe not to, I think that those things need to be controlled. I think that when there are certain periods of our life where having that aggression and that dominance may work in our favor, having that aggression, but like I said, controlled again. Like having that aggression, having that dominance to want to get promoted, want have that go-getter attitude to be like, look, I'm going to the next promotion board, I'm going to the soldier of the month, I'm going to the soldier quarter, I'm going back and I'm gonna requalify with my weapon, all of these different things like that. So all of those things, along with the leadership and confidence, all of those things affect men's mental and physical health. So I believe that instead of replacing, I don't know how, if I'm screwing up the question or not, but how could ideas like using aggression and dominance to replace leadership and confidence affect men's mental and physical health? I think those ideas to replace affected in a negative way. I think that you should not replace it, and you should add those things to leadership and confidence and not take them off the plate. And I agree with Coach too. Time and period. I don't think you can be 100% aggressive with just your career, because you have to have some balance. You have to control it, because you may have a family, you have other relationships and other responsibilities, and other different things in your life that you need to be doing as well, or that you may have to do as well. So, and it goes back to the quality of life in the question before this. So I think it affects it in a negative way. And to wrap up my talking point, add to but not take away the aggression and the dominance.
Actually, I love what y'all did there. Man, y'all good. So when I asked this question, and I think y'all caught it, so I don't even have to really explain it too much. But when I asked this question, I purposely used it as in the term of to replace versus use in light of, right? So because both of y'all have mentioned, there's a necessity for aggression and for dominance in this proper avenue, right? In this proper space. But if I use aggression as my leadership trait because I haven't really learned leadership, right? That's a learning situation. That's I needed to get time out to get some mentoring, some training, to see how effective leaders that were over you operated, and what can you adopt. Because I don't think aggression can be the leadership style, but it is definitely a necessity in how, especially as men. You can't tell me you want me to go out there, provide and protect, but not be aggressive. All right, I gotta have that in there, right? So, but that drum was already beat. I don't think there's any more to that tune to sing. So, I agree with y'all, but we just have to, and just like y'all said, we have to learn how to have these conversations of putting things in its proper perspective, right? And that's, to me, overall, that's the trick or the trap of masculinity, is that turns into toxicity, is when we misuse the traits, when we abuse certain traits. Like, I can't be aggressive all the time, right? I can't try to dominate everybody I talk to. Somebody got to be my peer. I got to have a friend I can go, I can sit down and sip some yak with and talk and talk about basketball. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm trying to dominate everybody in every conversation, that's, to me, you start to lose companionship in your life. And that becomes as much as people, I love my own space. Let me start by saying that. I love sitting in my office and hearing myself. All right. But can I imagine never being able to pick up the phone and call one of my brothers? Never being able to say, hey, let's go grab something to drink with any of my brothers or my friends. That begins to wear at the fabric of it, because now you have to find ways to keep your mind going and keep, just because you isolated yourself. In a sense. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can I? Because if we can bring up that definition of aggression as defined by Google, I think this is why I say we got to. Just because it exists out there doesn't mean we need to take it for face value. Because in this particular definition, it shows and is articulated as aggression as a bad thing, right? It's only a bad thing if I use it the wrong way. But at the end of the day, if somebody breaks in this house at 3 o'clock in the morning and we all in the bed, you want that act of aggression, because what the part that this definition does not highlight, it does not highlight deter, and it does not highlight confront. And so at the end of the day, when we look at aggression, trust and believe. If you laying beside any man and something going on downstairs, you say, hey, go downstairs and see what that is. You go downstairs and see what that is. I guarantee you on the phone the next day telling me he less than a man. So that's why I say we have to look at certain definitions that exist and then ask ourselves the validity of these definitions. Because I promise you that it's a thing called readiness, right? I always talk about the Most High from two perspectives, because he is the God of love and peace. But in order for love and peace to exist, he also has to be the God of war. And if war was never available, then trust me, peace would not be prevalent. And that's the thing that a lot of us keep missing. Stop being confused. I'm not saying that you were, right? Stop being confused at what social society is trying to convince people that a thing is. It is not true. That's why the army exists. The army exists to deter war. How do they deter war? By being ready to attack at any given point in time.
Coach, since we're on definitions, do you think you would be okay with maybe shedding a little bit more light on kind of like what I talked about, specifically my definition of aggression was just being, hard charging, just like trying to go get it. You know what I mean? It wasn't to the definition that I don't remember who had it. I'm sorry. But whoever had the definition, I apologize if I don't remember the name, but thank you for putting it up there. But it wasn't to that. So you gave a definition. I kind of gave a different one, and then there was the one from Google. So what are your thoughts on the definition that I had?
With your definition, I can see that as an act of, I can see that in certain situations as an act of aggression, right? If it's something that I'm competing for, right, then sure, there may be an act of aggression in the competition aspects of it, because I want my competitors to know that there is a determination that I have within me that is not going to accept second place as an answer. But and again, that's why I say to a certain degree, but I also believe that determination is probably more so along the lines of what you were talking about as well. But I can see how aggression fits into that. But in this
Okay.
regard, when we're, based upon this question, I think again, when we allow society to tell us that aggression is bad, then now what we're doing is we're losing the ability to defend our own families, to defend and protect our own families. And trust and believe, when the zombie apocalypse happens, right? And I'm saying it that way in a particular way. Read between the lines, y'all figure it out. When the zombie apocalypse happen, you want these little tools I got hidden around this house to be ready. You want me to be ready to use them at any given point in time for the sake of your protection and longevity. So that's why I say we got to challenge definitions. Just because Google said that don't make it true.
Right. Don't nobody want to watch a boxing match when nobody wants to swing. No, right? Like, and I think, and it's funny because we used to say this back in the day. Like, we saw this change in the NBA, right? Around the early 2000s, to where what was considered a foul began to change, and we're like, man, you want these guys to get out here compete? Just what you're saying. You want these guys to get out here compete, and to show their athleticism and their competitiveness and their drive, and you don't think there's going to be any level of aggression? You can't call everything a flagrant foul, right? But that contact will happen in all sports, right? Because there's a level of aggression that comes with competition, and that actually brings more entertainment value to it, right? So just what Coach was saying. So we act like we can't stand the word aggression, but it's all around us, and it makes it, and it's honestly the thing that's been making us the most money. What do you think these actors are portraying in Marvel? Aggression. They're portraying now, but it's a billion dollar set of movies. Why? Because they out there fighting, shooting, flipping, kicking, punching. And I'm not saying aggression always look like violence, right? Or what have you. But you want me to be able to get violent and willing to get violent. I don't want to stick on that too long. You look like you got you got something else on. Okay.
Now I'm looking at the comments.
Okay. Yeah. Can we bring Lisa she's famous tonight. Bring her other comment up. And time is moving on us, so forgive me. So she said, in my generation, for girls, it was do, but when we know better, we do better. So I have a question. If we could be brief, so we can roll with this. So I agree. When we know better, we do better, and I do. And that's kind of what I was talking about with my grandmother, right? My sisters did a lot of stuff in the house. My sisters were taught to do that. My older sisters, well, all my sisters are old as I was a baby, right? But men were taught to do in a different way. We weren't taught to do the dishes back then. We were taught to take out the trash. We were taught to cut the lawn. We were taught. My father used to take us when he went and renovated apartments. We learned how to paint, how to plumb, how to do all these different things, how to work on your car. We teach boys how to do all these things. Now, my question is, we said we know better, we do better. In today's society, we stop teaching the women to do, but we still teaching the men to do. Is that how do we even out that balance?
I want to make sure I'm understanding the question. When you say how do we even out that balance, are you talking about the way forward or what we see now?
The way forward from what we see now.
Well, so just like we recognized in the past that some things were taught wrong, we also need to recognize right now where we taught some things wrong, right? And our generation specifically, not just our generation, the generation before us as well, boomers, Gen X's, so forth and so on. What we've done, I believe, is overcorrected some things that we didn't like. Not that it was wrong, we just didn't like it. I think at the end of the day, should we teach children responsibility through chores? Absolutely. I believe we should teach children responsibility through chores. But what do you see now? Well, you see now, TVs, video games, and YouTube has literally taught them, they're teaching them life outside of parent skills. So I think we need to go back to teaching the things that kind of put boys and girls on the right path, but then teach them life skills as well. Teach them emotional intelligence, teach the soft skills that they need so that they can be better communicators, so that they can actually exist in relationships. And from the boy perspective, since we're talking about toxic masculinity, that you are more than just provide and protect, which means that in order for them to get that clear understanding that daddy has to be in the house. I'm sorry, I get it. I don't care about what, society talks about. I don't care about, family code. I don't care about none of that. Daddy needs to be in the house, which means that in the beginning, mama and daddy, before they become mama and daddy, they need to make very good choices of who they tend to intermingle with, so that when they do have a child, they are there for the sake of the child. And if it doesn't work, make a mature adult decision that both of you will actually be a part of that child's upbringing, not just one controlling the other through the lens of that child by way of family court. So I think in the means of all of that, we get to the point to where we, teaching holistically, responsibility, soft skills, relationship development.
A lot of what I want to say would sound very similar to what Coach just said, with the mindset Coach just said. So what I'm gonna do is, for the sake of time, I'm just gonna second what Coach said.
Ditto. All right. Let's move forward. The next topic is the man up culture. Yeah. So let's bring up the first question in this topic. So the question is, have you ever experienced boys or men being punished or ridiculed for emotional expression?
Yep. I've been on both sides of it.
Ditto.
Been on both sides of it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Absolutely.
100%.
Well, that boy, is he crying? And what he said Friday, he gonna cry in the car, right? And we all love to make fun of that scene. You just stole his grandmama chain. What are you supposed to do, right? I second the notion, right? So, with that said, would you have handled the next question? I'm sorry, which is, would you have handled the moments that you remember on whatever side you want to choose to be on? Would you have handled the situation or the moment differently? And if you care to elaborate, please do.
So I'm gonna say no. I wanna for anybody who may want to say no, I'm gonna roll with the no, and here's why. Whatever that did, whatever I did, whatever I didn't do, whatever that experience was, I learned from it. Whatever that experience was, maybe that experience prevented me from getting court-martialed later on down the road for taking that aggression. This time we are talking about what the definition is, taking that aggression to that level, right? And being disrespectful, being part of the toxic leadership, just being honest. I was part of that for a small portion of my career. Not proud of it, but I've learned from it. And that's why I say I wouldn't I'm going with the no for this. I can definitely argue a yes for this as well, but I'm gonna go with a hard no for this one, is saying whatever I went through and whatever I did, all of those situations may have prevented me from getting court-martialed, may have prevented me from getting killed. There was a lesson there in whatever it is that I did, even though it may have been bad. But I can definitely, like I said, I can argue yes to this too, but I'll let Coach grab some.
Yeah, but my answer is simple. I couldn't. I couldn't handle it differently because I didn't create the situation. I was only the recipient of the situation. So, like being told, "Little boys don't cry, stop crying, man, brush it off," and how could I handle it differently? I wasn't taught the proper way to respond to that. I just responded to it the way that I knew how. So when they tell you to stop crying, you stop crying. You try to, bite it in and deal with it and suck it up. So yeah, there was nothing I could have done differently. Now, in retrospect, when it came down to my son, like if something was to happen to him and he start crying, one of the things I told his mom, I said, don't be so quick to run to him when he is crying. Let him come to you. That's different now because now he is dealing with those things that have bothered him or hurt him, or even in some instances it may have injured him. It may have hurt for real, physical pain. But he is processing that on his way from getting up and coming to you. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I feel what you're saying. Because as the recipient, you really can't do anything differently. I guess in my mind, when I was writing this question, I was thinking, if I'm putting myself in the mind of the person who was doing the ridiculing or what have you, and it's funny when I've witnessed, I've been a victim of it, and I've been a perpetrator of it. Right? I think that like Uncle was saying, I've been on all three. Right? As the viewer, there were times that I have done things differently because I don't like seeing people bullied, mistreated, or what have you. But I think your response, Coach, is my response to what I did differently overall, which was I try to do differently with my boys. Now, granted, my parenting situation is different than some, but when I can interject, when I have that ability to influence, my mindset with my boys is, especially when they were younger, is let them cry. You can't run to every aid. And I think that's where this thing we keep talking about, emotional intelligence, begins to get created in the man, is when we allow him to allow that little boy to work out his own emotion. Because I can't tell my son you have to learn when to express your emotions. It's not that you can't show emotions, that you have to understand when is an appropriate time, place, space, and person makes a difference. All right. You, you might not want to go to, if you like that job and the boss made you mad, you might not want to go cuss him out. Not right there on the spot. You might want to take your time, collect yourself, go sit down, and think about what you want to say. And if you want to address it in a proper way, right? But I think that starts right there with that let them cry it out. I think too often we run to our children's aid every time they cry. But guess what? I do it with my girls too. I don't, and I know as daddy, I hate hearing my girls cry. I hate hearing them cry. I hate calling my youngest son sometimes. Not hate, but you know what I'm saying when I say, because when my baby girls get on the tablet and they see his daddy, when are you coming home? And they start crying. Daddy, we want to see you. Daddy, can we come with you? Can we? And they sitting there crying, and I don't really have a response, because my response would come off, as microaggressions. but what do you say to those little girls, right? And how do you respond to that? But that's their story. And if I try to cry with them, oh babies, I want, oh it's okay, let me hug you, they won't be able to they won't learn how to handle the emotion of not having daddy there. Because guess what? That's their reality. I can't rewrite their story. Their mama picked up and moved all the way to Georgia. So, and they have to learn to grow up and be healthy emotionally in spite of that situation. So I can't join or pacify all the time. And I know that that's a hard thing to say. I appreciate you, sis, but that's a reality, and to me that's how I fix it. I fix it in the next generation. Man, let's. I think the third question will be addressed in the final thought question. Can be addressed in the final thought question. So with that said, let's jump to the last topic, which is the fix. In the fix, you kind of want to stir these conversations, not focused on the problem, but bring up the problem, identify it. Now let's talk. And I like how Coach says it, how to move forward. Not even just how to address it, but how do we walk forward in it, right? So with that, let's bring up the first question. Where do you believe we, as men, learn our relation? I don't think I wrote this right. We learn our emotions, our emotional habits in relationships. That's how I apologize for the mistake.
Yes. That's my answer. Yes. That's really what happens. That's where we learn it from. Yes. It's not like somebody took the time to teach it to us. It's not like it was nurtured during any particular relationship. It's almost like you say, I'm about to be an airplane pilot with no formal training. And then the only thing somebody taught you to do is take off from the runway. So now you're fumbling and fighting your way through the sky, trying to find some type of stable ground, trying to deal with turbulence, trying to do all of those different things. Is there, in most cases, now I can't speak for every man, but in most cases, either their dad doesn't deal with emotions, their dad don't know how to handle their own emotions, so they can't teach the son how to handle their own emotions. The dad was absent, so he didn't have the ability to teach them how to handle their own emotions. mom really can't teach you how to handle emotions through the lens of a man because she's not a man. She can only teach you what she can teach you, and that's about it. So at the end of the day, my answer to this question is yes.
I need to clarify question again, my brother.
Yeah, my bad, because I did mistype. So is where do you believe that we learn our emotional habits in relationships?
Well, we are in the age of technology, so I believe that a lot of people learn it from TikTok and from scammers and from bad coaches, bad therapists. I believe that there are people that are seeking information on relationships, on how to deal with emotions. And I believe that there is a population of people who are out there getting scammed. So I believe that some people are out there getting information from people they shouldn't be getting information from. Um,
I
for the sake of time.
agree. I
Okay.
agree.
Okay.
But I think mostly in the social media space, what you have is confirmation bias. They don't go listen to somebody else that challenge what they think. They
Right.
conform to people that already think the way that they're thinking, and those are the
Hmm.
people that they listen to. Like I wish
Yeah.
I had a dollar for every, and pardon my French, I love y'all. I wish I had a dollar for every video that somebody send me that a particular young lady is talking. And even though she may talk about the Bible, if you listen to what she is saying, it is not Bible, it is not Bible talk, it is Bible-ish, right? Because she'll still talk about the Bible, but then go back to a worldly concept. And it's like in my mind, like, oh my God, can you not see this? So I don't believe that people actually listen to people who are trying to teach them something. I think what people listen to are people who are already talking like them, and it confirms what they're already thinking.
100%. 100%. I think that's why if you look at it right, some of the men who social media, even if you go greater than social media, right? Let's just talk. I don't like the name drop, but I'm gonna say it. Let's talk about Steve Harvey. How did he become from and think about it. He came from Showtime at the Apollo. This is what we knew him from. Then Steve Harvey show. Then he did a couple of specials that I thought was okay. And then boom, he's one of the greatest voices of all time. Why? Because he said what a lot of people wanted to hear.
Mhm.
He gave them exactly what they wanted to hear, and it feels good. It sounds good. And he wrote this book. I'm not. I don't think it's biased to say, but he said what women want to hear. Women are the largest consumers, so you sell to who you sell to, and so he wrote this book, Think Like a Man, and they really thought they were thinking like men in this book, right? But same thing for some right, but that's how we get to the bad doctrine. We're preaching and teaching and saying what people want to hear, and it propels us, and those are the ones that we made millionaires, right? Gave these 10,000 followers or 10,000 congregation members, and the same thing on social media. You see men and women, and there's women who saying things that men want to hear. There's men who saying things that women want to hear, and vice versa. Why? Because they're trying to drive engagement, and
Mhm.
so that's where the confirmation bias come from, because they're all trying to drive engagement. They're not trying to help the community. Man. Whew. I could I could stay right here, but we are running on the church's money right now. So with that said, let's go to the last question. We try to hit that, then we're going to jump into our final thoughts. So the third question on this one is, I'm sorry, the third question on this one. That question for the parents. So, is the ability to combat the influences, right, personal, community, or global. So What? So let me clarify, right? So is the ability to combat these influences, is that my responsibility? Is it something that we need to do as a community, or is it something that is globally influenced? How do we address this?
Yes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, man. And I don't want to give my final thought right now, but yes, that's the answer. It is a personal, communicative, and global responsibility.
Yes, and um, definitely not or. I think definitely personal, communicative, and global. However, comma, at the end of the day, the person in the mirror. Even though, however, comma, there are communicative and global things that may be out of our control. At the end of the day, no one's going to stand in proxy for us.
In a
Pulling over.
oh my bad.
I said I'm pulling over.
Oh, you pulled it back over. Okay. So in a perfect world, I believe communicative, right? In a perfect world, uh, but we can never take individual responsibility away in anything. But and the reason why I lean more into the communicative, because if we say global, I think cultures are different, communities are different, and we should be responsible within ourselves, right? So first individuals, then community. Global, I can't really put the onus globally for me personally, um, but in a perfect world, I would definitely put more of it on the community. So, but where we are today, it is definitely our individual responsibility to one, not only talk to and listen to people that you agree with all the time. You gotta have something in your repertoire that challenges you, that pushes you against the grain, so that you can go back and either prove stronger your point of what you believe or what you stand on, or evolve it because you got more information. Everybody knows I love Proverbs 18 because it got a lot of punchlines in there for me. But it's a fool who argues without hearing the whole matter. So uh, that's why I hold my hat. So listen, I, I, I want everyone to actually kind of look at this final thought question that we got for the panel, but we kind of catered our final thoughts, and I shared this with the brothers in the back so that we can kind of evolve our comments as we go through this conversation. And so the question for today's final thought would be, how can we rewrite the code of masculinity to allow men to flourish in healthy relationship habits, healthy conflict resolution, leadership, and self-esteem? Um, and if you got anything you want to throw in the chats, but please listen to what these brothers got to say, and let's share it with a brother. Share it with the people around us that's connected to us, so that we can help our community as a whole get better. Um, so with that said, we're gonna start with the with the funk. Then we're gonna go to the mindset coach, and then I will close us out.
So, for my final thought, the question is, how can we rewrite the code of masculinity to allow men to flourish in healthy relationship habits, healthy conflict resolution, leadership, and self esteem? I want to start by saying I don't necessarily think that we need to rewrite the code. I think that what we need to do is get down and kind of how we talked about earlier in the show is to use the term masculinity for what it is. You know, masculinity is masculinity, and then there's things that are not masculinity. But I think, you know, to kind of, you know, dig a little bit deeper into the question, I think that one of the things, I mean, to my answer is we need to start with the word strength. Like, what does it really mean to be strong, to be a strong man? And I think strength and masculinity work well together. Now, this is not talking about physical strength. This is talking about mental strength. Talking about being able to be strong in different areas of your life, being able to control your emotions, being able to take accountability for things. All of these things are strengths and not weaknesses. Like I said again, being able to control your emotions. You know, so I believe that I want to start with strength when it comes to this question. And I think that, you know, if someone doesn't really know what that looks like and where to start, I would start by, you know, when they're looking at strength, is going places where men are being men, and where are some of these places. So like hobbies, like what are some things you're doing? So like maybe you're into RC cars, or you into running. We go places where men are doing RC cars, or running. The gym is a great place to where other men are being men, and they're working on themselves. Home Depot, go to Home Depot, go build something, be creative, use your hands. You know, these different things are, you know, some of the stereotypical things about men. But one of the things you'll learn is, as a man, when you're around men, you learn more about, you know, different strengths and what it takes to be a man and flourish, and different things like that. Just being on this podcast on Friday nights, and Coach's Corner, and, you know, all these different podcasts and Hearts of Women and stuff like that, I've learned from men about different aspects of life that has helped me, you know, in, you know, with leadership, with self-esteem, with all of these different things that were mentioned here. So rewriting it, not necessarily all about rewriting it for me, is more so using masculinity for what it is. And anything is not masculinity is opposite of masculinity. And that's it. That's my final thought.
Yeah, I love this question, and I'm just going to give you a disclaimer right now. I'm probably going to give a very unpopular response, and this unpopular response is not geared at tearing anyone down, but it's only geared at helping us understand how we can build ourselves back up. When we look at this question, how can we rewrite the code of masculinity to allow men to flourish in healthy relationship habits? By recognizing that once the code is rooted in authentic masculinity, you don't have to allow him to do nothing. At the end of the day, he is the one that will actually do it. He doesn't have to be allowed to do it. That's one of the biggest misconceptions I believe that we have. When it comes down to this thing called relationships, it's a reason why when a man get married, she changes her last name, because at the end of the day, there's supposed to be a respect that is rooted in that person's name. The issue is that he was never taught that. So, in order to write it, you got to go all the way back to the beginning. That person has to have a good concept of their identity. Once they have a good concept of their identity, then they can have a solid identity that's rooted in masculinity. From that point on, they can posture themselves in the seat of masculinity. Therefore, they get to express it in that manner. It's that simple. When we actually do it in that fashion, I think you don't have to allow a man to do anything. The man becomes that space in order for the family to actually thrive. That's why I stated previously, it is a personal, it is a community, and it is a global responsibility. Why is that? Because if I accept the challenge on a personal level, and if every man in this neighborhood accepts the challenge on a personal level, it now becomes a community responsibility. And if every man in every community accepts that challenge at the community level, it now becomes a county responsibility. And from the county, it grows into a state, and from states to states. It's not by happenstance that when we go and look at the scriptures, one of the things that resonates is that every creature must hear the word. That's a global responsibility. I do believe when we go back and look at it from a holistic perspective, the question becomes, what are you teaching as a man? I ask that question again. If you are a man, listen to me. What are you teaching as a man? The biggest question is, what are you teaching younger men? Because if at our generation, Gen X, if we're not recognizing that, hey, we did some things wrong, we understood some things wrong. So now we have a responsibility to teach those things through the lens of transparency, saying, number one, we did some things wrong. We didn't do it right. We overcorrected. And now we created more of the same problems that already previously existed. So now how do we right the ship? How do we get back in it? Go back and look at the concept of what manhood is all about, and then teach that so that that young boy can now have a good identity of what manhood is. That way he does not have to be manipulated, and he does not have to be coerced, and he does not have to be deceived when it comes down to the space of relationship. That's really the big problem that we're existed in. We're existing in a space to where people are calling them relationships, but they're manipulative and deceptive in nature. So how do we rewrite the ship? We go back and we remove all of the potential manipulation and deceptive tactics out of the teaching. Therefore, now moving forward, that young man now has a better place to thrive and flourish and exist in healthy relationship, understanding how to resolve conflict and leading through the lens of a Christ-centered focus, because he is esteeming and expressing the Holy Spirit through the lens of his identity.
Whew, you brothers. And I'm gonna have to rewrite some of my notes messing with y'all now. So the way I'm looking at this is, one, and I'm right there where Coach started at. One, let's identify what masculinity is. Teach it properly, right? Because once you identify masculinity, I'm right there. I don't have to, like you said, allow or make a man do anything. When he's taught properly, he will do the things he'll do things properly. But I want to put on top of that, my very first point is, get out of this space that fathers are not a necessity in parenting. We cannot continue to go down this route that we've been going. We can't keep going down this route to where the idea of parenting is single motherhood. I hear it. I know that that's not us. It's not our community, but that is our cultural norm today. Is that parenting is mother? It's a mother thing. Fathers, you're just a financial responsible party in the mix. You're not really there to be there. You're not there to speak. You're not there to have an opinion. Or let's just call a spade a spade. You're not there. We have to stop isolating fatherhood away from our children. You're not protecting the children. But we've been doing this for a couple of generations now, and then turning around and complaining about the community that we have, complaining about our dating options, complaining about the men that are out there, complaining about the women that are out there. But the one common factor across the board in our community is we are removing fathers out of the home at an accelerated rate. And every time it seems like we're getting ready to turn the tide, we keep on flipping it back on his neck. So to me, it starts right there. And then to the young men who may view this, right, because a lot of us have grown up in this situation that we've grown up with, in the narratives that we've grown up with. So how do we flip it in our adulthood life, in our young adulthood life? And that's how I wrote it out. I just flipped a lot of things, right? So the first thing was find my identity first in the Most High, not in my performance, right? Learn emotional fluency over suppression. So learn how to express it properly, right? I think if we start working on teaching our boys that it's okay to seek help, it's okay to go talk to somebody. It's okay. Listen, and it's okay to go talk to somebody, not just because you're having a breakdown. It's okay to go talk to somebody to maintain your healthy mental state. You don't want to go get a psychiatrist. You go find you a good coach rooted in the Most High, right? Connection over isolation, right? I love, like I started off by saying, I love my own space. I think I love it a little too much sometimes. I'm probably the one that I'm talking about. But it's okay to go connect. But it's okay to isolate as well. It's okay to go through things and not want to be around everybody as well. But it's okay to go hang out with your boys when you're going through. It's okay to be seen out in public. It's okay to smile at people, and I think that's another thing a lot of us are not taught to smile in public. But I'll leave that alone. We talked about the whole performance thing, so let's start teaching how to be responsible and take responsibility over things versus having to perform for things. And conflict resolution. We have these conversations all the time, but we have to start normalizing these conversations more than the other conversations, especially in front of our young boys and our young men. I can keep going on, but everything that we talk about that we see that have been suppressing the potential of manhood in our community, let's flip it and let's put it in its proper place, its proper perspective, and let's grow. That's all I got on my final thought. Listen, it has been a night. I appreciate y'all for hanging out with me for 16 extra minutes than I was supposed to keep y'all. That is on me. It's kind of like I say, some of these conversations get good, and y'all indulge us sometimes. So I appreciate y'all. Coach, I appreciate y'all for making me sound like I came up with good questions by having great responses, because we already know the panel drives the conversation, and so it's always appreciated, especially the work that we put into to trying to bring it to life. So listen, I think this is the third Saturday, so we have the Hearts of Women tomorrow. All right, so that will be 9:30 my Central Time, 10:30 Eastern Time. Go ahead and share this video with your friends, share it with your family, and then tell them if they want they want the other half, tune into the women tomorrow. All right, let's push the videos, the podcast out. Sunday, I think we're going live on Voice of Reason. That's her TikTok name, but that's Sister Lisa Keys. So let's join in there so we can join in for a really great conversation there as well. Do we got anything else, Coach, that I missed?
Yeah, man, I do got one other thing. Listen, y'all playing around. Y'all better get this crystal creation. I'm trying to tell you, that girl is putting it out. The new Hearts of Men shirt. There's a new Hearts of Women shirt out there. I'm telling you, the designs are just coming and they are fire. So, reach out to that sister and let her know you want one. Because I'm trying to tell you, and it's not extremely expensive either. It's not expensive at all, to be honest with you. So everybody get your Hearts of Men shirt, get your Hearts of Women shirt. Coach's Corner as well. Get your Coach's Corner shirt. They're nice.
That's fine. Hey, get your merch. Register for the conference. Let's get in there. Let's get in there. Any alibis to coach?
No, man. Make sure everybody hit that like button and share before you close this out.
In the words of every sermon you ever had, and I do say who. With that said, listen, y'all have a great night. Y'all be blessed. Listen, my mantra has always been, be available for everybody that's around you. I think the best ability we have is our availability. That's with our mental, that's with our health. And I think that's what this conversation talks about when it comes to men. It's our availability, our mental, emotional stability and availability. Same thing to my sisters. I love you. I appreciate you, and y'all be blessed.